Tikal was the capital of a conquest state that became one of the most powerful kingdoms of the ancient Maya, and historians believe that it dates back all the way to 1000 BC. It's one of the largest archaeological sites in Mesoamerica, and it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site beginning in 1979, but there's still so much left to be uncovered and excavated. Something that's really interesting about Tikal is that it was just abandoned. The Mayans actually just left the city, and it's not really known 100% what the main cause was, but people do speculate that it could have been a lack of resources drying up, including water and food sources and whatnot. So to get into Tikal, it costs about $20 US. It's 150 quetzal, and you pay before you enter. There's a whole gate where you have to show your tickets and everything. The park is open from 6 a.m. to 5 p.m., but you can do sunrise and sunset tours, but you do need to sign up for that in advance, and it does cost more. Typically, you also need to go with a guide. And currently, you can't purchase tickets online, so you do have to do it when you're entering the park.
We decided to go with a guide when we visited Tikal because we wanted to get all of the information about the history, and we would recommend a guide if you're doing a short one-day tour of the area, just so you can see as much as possible. But if you're there for 2 or even 3 days, you might not want a guide for the whole time because you're going to have a lot of time to explore on your own.
It gives you more context of what the ancient Mayan civilization was really like there, and they really can explain all the different historical significances and cultural significance of each of the buildings and the temples and the pyramids, more so than you would be able to do on yourself, even if you had researched ahead of time. I feel like I got a lot out of learning about all the different Mayan numbers and what they mean, and how certain temples are connected to certain rulers versus the underworld, and it was just fascinating, and I feel like I wouldn't have had the same experience learning about the Mayan culture if we didn't have a guide. So I would highly recommend it if you aren't familiar with the history of the Mayans in Guatemala, and it'll make your experience a lot more educational and cultural.
So getting to Tikal can be kind of difficult, especially because the main airport that you fly into is in Guatemala City. That's their main international airport, and throughout the entire country, there's only one other airport, and it is actually flying from Guatemala City up to Flores. The flight was super easy, about an hour from beginning to end getting there. We would highly recommend that, especially if you're on a time crunch. Driving it, you will be able to see a lot more, but it is a long drive. It's like 12 hours to go from Guatemala City all the way up to Flores. You can stop at a couple other areas like Samuk Champay and the caves and a couple other fun areas that you can go hiking with. But if you guys are just looking to check out Tikal and then come back to the southern part of Guatemala, then we would highly recommend checking out the flight.
If you guys are bringing checked luggage, just know that it is a budget airline that flies you out to Tikal, and you will be having to pay a lot more money for that. So just keep that in mind when you're packing for your trip.
So we stayed in the town of Coban when we were up there trying to visit Tikal. That is about as close as you can get right outside the town of Flores. So we would recommend staying there. There's a ton of different tour buses, tours all over the place, and it is a great little city stay, and especially because it's right on the lake, so it's a beautiful spot.
So the first temple that we visited was Temple 1, and it's located in the middle of Tikal National Park. It's known as the Temple of the Great Jaguar, which is known for one of Tikal's greatest rulers that was actually buried there. And this temple is one of the oldest. It was built in 682 AD, and it is right across from Temple 2, which is known as Temple of the Masks. And this one was built in honor of the ruler's wife, so they are right across from each other. Temples 1 and 2 are located in what's known as the Grand Plaza, and this is going to be a very central area of Tikal where a lot of excavations are going on currently, as well as where a lot have been uncovered already. So we are here in Temple 1 and 2 in the North Acropolis of Tikal, and this is the King's Temple, and then we're standing on the Queen's Temple. There's a lot of cultural significance here in the Mayan religion and culture, and it's a lot on numbers. So you can see there's 9 columns going up. Our guide said that represents how long human gestation is, so it takes 9 months to form a baby. And then you can see on this one, there's 3 different columns, and that represents heaven, the earth, and then the underworld. And the Mayans didn't believe in hell, they believed in the underworld. So over here you can see there's 9 different columns, and that represents the 9 days that your soul would stay in the underworld. And then towards this way you would have heaven. Super fascinating learning about all the different numbers and significances and things like that. And apparently these two aren't even the biggest ones. We're gonna go check out an even bigger temple.
So temple 3 was a little bit different because it wasn't actually completely excavated. Something that was interesting about all of Tikal was that it cost so much money to excavate these, where you'll see mounds and different hills that have tons of trees in them, and you wouldn't think anything of it. But when you're walking through, our guide was telling us, oh yeah, this is a temple and that was a temple, and it was crazy to see. So temple 3, you can see the top of it. That was the only part that was excavated, but it's not completely done. It might be in the future, but at the time we were visiting, it was not done yet. And the biggest temple out of all of them was temple number 4. It's standing 65 meters tall, and this was our favorite spot, both for where we would recommend sunrise and for just seeing over the entire jungle. We are now up here at the biggest temple. This is going to be temple 4 in the very back. So you can see we were all the way over there. We walked through the Grand Plaza. That was where 1 and 2 were. We went by 3. They're still working on the excavation. Over here you can actually see one of the largest buildings in the whole area. It's the South Acropolis. It's something that they're still working on excavating. They've only been doing it for about 40 years here, and there's tons of work that is still to be done, but absolutely gorgeous. This is one of the best spots for sunrise because the sunrise is right up over the temples, especially if you are here on March 21st on the spring equinox. That is when it lines up perfectly. So highly recommend visiting Tikal. This is temple 1. Way over here we have temple 2. That's the Queen's temple, King's temple, what we were looking at. Right here is temple 3. This one was made by a queen, and that is the only one that is not excavated out of this. Right now we are on the astronomical site, and over here is the last temple. So we would recommend going one day if you want to see the highlights. We got to see all the main temples, the Grand Plaza, walk around the main areas, and we spent a lot of time just checking out the different birds and animals that were there, and I felt like it was fine, and we were only there for about a half day. If you guys want to see all of the temples 1 through 6, as well as sides, and actually walk within some of the different excavation sites, then we would definitely recommend a longer stay.
Tikal is absolutely huge. Like, the highlights definitely takes a full day. If you want to see all of the current things that have been uncovered, then you're definitely going to want to spend at least 2 to 3 days. That's what our guide recommended there, to see everything. That would mean you wouldn't stay in Coban, you'd probably stay closer to Flores instead. But if you guys are only spending a week or so in Guatemala, we definitely think one day is good enough before you head on to the next location. Tikal is actually so massive that they only think that around 10% of the whole area of where the civilization had been has been excavated. Once again, it's probably due to cost reasons. Our guide said it takes around, $25 million to just uncover one mound. So a lack of funding and resources is a lot of why this area doesn't get as much attention as other big Mayan civilization areas.
This part of the rainforest is completely different than the rest of Guatemala. If you watched our last video on Acatenango, the entire bottom section of it is these crazy volcanoes and ridges, and there's not really a straight road. As soon as you're up here in the rainforest section, it is completely flat. There's no real big mountains there, and any mountains or hills that you do see, they say, oh yeah, it's a temple.
So something that's really cool about being in the middle of the jungle out here is the amazing wildlife opportunities out here. Our guide says that there's like so many jaguars out here. So if you're driving around dusk or dawn, make sure to keep an eye out for jaguars. We personally ran into a lot of monkeys. There's spider monkeys and there's howler monkeys. And if you guys have never heard what a howler monkey sounds like,
it's insane.
Yeah, it's insane. They're like the second loudest animal on earth behind the whale or something. And so these guys made it sound like someone was dying in the forest. Like, they must have been a mile away and you could hear them screaming. It's an experience.
They actually took the howler monkeys and the tiger or the lion's loud roar, and that's how they made the sounds in Jurassic Park for all the different dinosaurs. So while we were walking around, one of the craziest things that we saw throughout the whole area that our tour guide was showing us was the acoustic system they had within the area. It just showed how advanced they were.
Okay, so the sound that you are going to hear from the temple 2 is like a recreation of the sound of the quetzal bird. So that's why has been taken like the Guatemalan national bird, because for our ancestors, that's a bird of liberty.
Right.
Then you hear the sound coming from the temple. It's exactly the same sound of the quetzal bird.
How did they do that?
That's insane.
How did you discover
Definitely,
that?
they were acoustic engineers.
Yeah.
Because in other way, not possible to explain that that is possible.
Like what?
G is mind blown right now.
Wow. I know.
This is directly in the middle of Temple 1 and Temple 2. This is known as the Grand Plaza. If you stood in the very middle of the Grand Plaza and clapped, you could be able to hear the sound of the quetzal, which was a very common bird back when the Mayans used to live there, and is now the national bird of Guatemala. So that was really cool to see. If we moved a little to the side, you couldn't hear it, but if you were in the exact middle of the Grand Plaza, you could hear it out of Temple 2. It completely blew Giselle's mind when we were there.
The Mayans were just so smart. Like, everything in Tikal was structured around, like, astronomy and numbers and seasons and sunrise and sunset. And it's crazy to think that these people from thousands and thousands of years ago were able to do this all by hand, and there was not like some crazy technology to help them out when they were building this. But everything has a meaning, and there's some sort of like balance where there's one thing representing life, there's one thing representing death, and then where there's one temple coming up for the sunrise, there's one for the sunset. So it's just really cool to really immerse yourself in that environment and see how smart these ancient Mayan civilizations were. So we're actually going to be coming out with a full Guatemala itinerary in the future, and we definitely think Tikal should make your short list on the top things to do in Guatemala.
It was absolutely incredible. I would rank it out of all the things that we did within the top 2. The only thing that I would put above it was probably our Acatenango hike when we were hiking up the volcano to watch Volcan de Fuego. If you missed that video, you can check it out right up here. That was our last video on Guatemala. One of the coolest experiences we've ever done.
It's really fascinating if you're into history and really want to delve into the culture and also see wildlife and have a little bit of adventure. Tikal's got everything for a traveler to Guatemala. So that is it for our ultimate Tikal guide in Guatemala. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure to hit that thumbs up button and subscribe for more content like this. We have tons of more Guatemala content coming out, like our Lake Atitlan itinerary, as well as our ultimate Guatemala itinerary. So keep an eye out for that.
If you guys want to see more behind the scenes stuff or any like the crazy moments in Guatemala, don't forget to check out our Unfiltered Adventures podcast. Go ahead and link it down below. But we talk about all of the curated stuff that we post on Instagram or TikTok or here on YouTube for the B-roll and put that in a fun little podcast. So if you want a little bit more of Guatemala, make sure to check that out down below. And that is about it. We'll see you guys out there on the next adventure.